They made Evara Brindle wear the Shame Pelt, because a wolfless woman was supposed to look smaller under dead fur. No one asked why a dead pelt needed laughter if shame was truly all it carried. Laughter was not decoration. It was the rite's hook. The entire court of Thornhall had gathered to watch it happen. They stood beneath black wolf banners and antlered chandeliers, nobles in winter silks, warriors in dark leather, council elders wrapped in silver-trimmed cloaks. At the far end of the hall, the shame dais waited like a butcher's block dressed in ceremony. Moonlight poured through the high windows and turned every stone cold, every jewel sharp, every face pale with expectation. Evara stood at the center of it all, with bare feet on the black floor. Her hands were not chained. That would have suggested danger. Instead, the guards held the old torn pelt between them. Gray, ragged, stiff with age, patched in places with black thread where the fur had once been cut too close to the hide. It smelled of dust, old smoke, and something deeper that no one around her seemed willing to name. The shame pelt had been used for generations. Used things learned to remember hands even when courts pretended they remembered only guilt. A wolfless woman wore it when the court wanted her to remember what she lacked. A failed heir wore it when his beast did not answer the moon. A servant wore it when accused of reaching above her blood. The pelt never changed. It only hung across shoulders heavy and ugly while the court laughed. That was the point. A dead wolf on a living body. A lesson made visible. But lessons made from skin could still remember who cut them. High Huntmaster Oren Voust stepped forward with a ceremonial hook of black iron in one hand. He was tall and severe, his beard trimmed close, his dark hunting coat clasped at the throat with wolf teeth. The court trusted him because he spoke cruelty as if it were discipline. Evara Brindle, he announced, born under Thornhall's protection, raised in lower service, tested under 3 moons, and found without wolf breath, wolf shadow, or shift blood. A few young nobles smiled. Evara kept her eyes forward. She had learned years ago that looking down pleased them too much. Oren circled her slowly. You were given work in the pelt rooms out of mercy. You were allowed to brush the battle hides oil, the memory straps, and sweep the ash from relic hooks. Yet last night you were found with your hands on the royal lost pelt. Evra's fingers curled once at her sides. I was cleaning it, she said. The hide had already been warm when she found it. Warm things were easier to call dead when servants were the only witnesses. Her voice sounded small in the hall, but it did not shake. Oren's mouth sharpened. A wolfless servant does not clean royal relics unless commanded. I was commanded. By whom? Evara looked toward the pelt room doors. No one stood there now. The boy who had brought the order was gone. A page with frightened eyes and a silver collar, too young to know that errands could become traps. If she named him, Oren would crush him before nightfall and still call her a liar. So she said nothing. The court took her silence as guilt. Oren lifted the iron hook. You touched what was kept from lower hands. You disturbed a relic belonging to the king's private grief. Therefore you will wear the shame pelt, and accept the court's laughter as correction. A cold murmur passed through the hall. Private grief. Those 2 words changed the air. At the top of the dais, Alpha King Kaelor Draven sat on the black wolf throne. He had not spoken. He did not need to. Power sat around him like a second body. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in black armor, chased with silver clawwork, his dark hair loose around a face carved from restraint and winter. His eyes were pale gold but not warm. They looked like fire seen through ice. Behind him on the wall, his wolf shadow should have stood proud and massive. Instead, it lay narrow and still. Not dead, not whole. Evara had noticed that before. No one else dared to. The court spoke of Kaelor's wolf as if it were simply controlled. Disciplined. Royal. A king's beast that did not waste itself on noise. But Evara had spent half her life caring for pelts, broken straps, battle hides, and old fur no one touched without gloves. She knew the difference between disciplined stillness and something wounded into obedience. And Kaelor's wolf shadow had the stillness of a beast, taught not to answer its own pain. Oren turned toward the throne. Majesty, by old rite, the shame pelt must be placed with your permission. Every face lifted. Kaelor's gaze lowered to Evara. For one breath, the hall narrowed around them. He looked at the torn gray pelt. Then at her bare shoulders. Then at her face, as if searching for the shape of fear he expected to find. Evara gave him none. Not because she was unafraid. Because fear was the only thing the court had never needed to steal from her. It had given her plenty. Kaelor's fingers tightened once on the arm of the throne. "Place it," he said. The words struck softer than a blade and deeper than one. The guards moved behind her. The pelt landed across Evara's shoulders. It was heavier than it looked. Cold at first, then not. Something beneath the dead fur pressed against the back of her neck like a breath held too long. Evara froze. The court began to laugh. Not loudly at first. Laughter in royal halls was trained. It came in polished pieces. A hidden smile, a lifted fan, a soft sound behind jeweled fingers. Then Oren looked toward the throne and raised his voice. "Let the wolfless girl be corrected." Kaelor's jaw tightened. Still he gave the command. Laugh. He had seen the pelt move, and still gave the court its teeth. A king's silence could be cruelty. His command made it law. The court obeyed. The sound rose like dogs breaking into a kill. Evara stood beneath it. The old pelt dragged against her skin. The torn hide warmed. The black thread patches tightened. Something inside the fur stirred, not alive, not dead, not gentle. Not choosing her. Remembering through her. The pelt needed shoulders, not devotion. Her knees nearly bent. She held them straight. Then the pelt lifted from her shoulders. The laughter faltered. One strip of gray fur rose behind her like a spine, remembering its shape. Another unfolded like a shoulder. The torn hide stretched outward, knitting itself in silver moonlight. Old smoke poured from the seams. Black thread snapped one stitch at a time. Oren stepped back. Kaelor stood. The pelt rose higher behind Evara, no longer hanging from her body, but growing from the air around her. Fur thickened. Claws formed. A massive head bent over her shoulder, its eyes burning silver. The court stopped laughing. The dead pelt opened its jaws. And the lost wolf behind Evara looked straight at Alpha King Kaelor Draven. Lost pelt retained. Shame rite entered. Servant shoulders selected. Hide record opened. The pelt had named the witness. It had not yet named the first wearer. The lost wolf behind Evara was not standing there to protect her. Protection would have been mercy. The pelt had opened memory instead. It did not step between her and the court. It did not lower its head to her hand. It did not snarl at the guards or bow before the Alpha King. The great silver-eyed shape only loomed from the torn pelt, still draped across her shoulders. Its body made of old fur, moonlit smoke, broken stitching and memory-given teeth. Evara remained on the shame dais, still wolfless, still accused. "Stick you do. You do, you do. Thani too, you do." Wearing the same dead thing they had used to make her small. It only remained as evidence with teeth, and evidence could still leave the accused bleeding if the court owned the knife. The court had stopped laughing, but silence was not mercy. Silence was only laughter holding its breath, until someone important told it what shape to take next. High Huntmaster Oren Voust found that shape first. He lifted the black iron hook between himself and the wolf rising from Evara's shoulders. Wolfless contamination. The words steadied the nobles at once. They had been waiting for doctrine, something cold and polished enough to stand between them and what their eyes had seen. Oren turned toward the throne. "Majesty, the servant's contact with forbidden relics has disturbed the pelt's surface memory. A shame pelt cannot testify through wolfless shoulders." The wolf behind Evara opened its jaws. No sound came out. Only cold air. Only the old smell of smoke iron and fur kept too long in a room where no one prayed. Evara felt the pelt gripping her shoulders. Not lovingly. Not gently. The hide needed a living body to hold the record open, and right now that body was hers. The weight of it pushed down on her collarbones until standing became work. She looked at Oren. "Then why are you afraid of what it remembers?" A few faces shifted. Oren's eyes narrowed. A guilty servant mistakes ritual correction for fear. Evara almost smiled. Guilty servant. Wolfless contamination. Surface memory. The names changed. The hook remained. That was how shame survived generations, not by truth, but by instruments. Alpha King Kaelor Draven stood before the black wolf throne, his face carved still, but the hand at his side had closed into a fist. Behind him, his wolf shadow pressed against the wall, narrow and wounded. Its head lifted toward the silver-eyed shape behind Evara. Not bowing. Not answering. Recognizing. That was worse for Kaelor than fear. Evara saw it before he could hide it. The torn pelt shifted. The great wolf shape lowered its massive head over her shoulder. Its silver eyes did not look at the court now. They fixed on the black iron hook in Oren's hand. Evara felt words rise through the hide before she understood they were not words at all, but pressure, memory, and pain looking for a mouth. She swallowed. Read who wore the shame first. Oren moved instantly. The accused has no right to command a royal relic. I am not commanding it, Evara said. You put it on me. The hall chilled. The pelt answered. Royal pelt entered. Wolf pain bound. Shame rite renamed. Servant shoulders blamed. The pelt had named the renaming. It had not yet named the hand that changed the rite. The words did not write themselves on stone. They appeared in the air as strips of silver fur, each line forming along the ribs of the wolf shape behind her. The court leaned back as though memory itself had become contagious. Kaelor read the lines once. Then again. His gaze caught on the second. Wolf pain bound. Behind him, his wolf shadow shuddered so violently that the black banners trembled against the wall. Oren struck the hook against the floor. Hide record distortion. The shame pelt has been worn by hundreds. It carries layered disgrace. It cannot identify royal history through a wolfless girl. Evara's shoulders shook under the weight of the pelt. It did not identify me. Kaelor looked at her. She met his eyes across the court. It identified shame, she said. The silver-eyed wolf behind her turned its head toward Kaelor, then slow and terrible. Not as a beast begging. Not as a beast forgiving. As a memory demanding recognition from the one person in the hall who had known its pain before it was renamed. Kaelor's mouth tightened. The court waited for him to deny it. Instead, his voice came low. I commanded laughter after I saw the pelt move. His confession did not lift the hide from her shoulders. It only made the laughter belong to him. The sentence landed harder than any shout. Evara felt it through the hide. The pelt did too. The wolf-shaped silver eyes burned brighter, but it did not soften toward him. Good. Some truths deserve to stand without becoming forgiveness. Evara looked at the king who had allowed her humiliation to become law. You did not need chains. You used laughter. And laughter once commanded by a king cut deeper than iron because everyone could pretend they had only obeyed sound. Kaelor flinched. Not visibly enough for the court to call weakness. Enough for Evara to see. Oren stepped onto the dais. The guards moved with him, uncertain, but obedient. The black hook lifted toward the pelt at Evara's shoulder. Remove it, Oren ordered. Close the record before contamination deepens. The wolf shape snarled without sound. Evara's breath caught as the hook slid beneath the torn hide near her throat. If Oren pulled, the pelt might come away. Or it might tear through whatever memory had opened. Either way, the court would call the break proof that the record had never been stable. Kaelor took one step forward. Oren did not look back. Majesty, if you interfere, the court will name this royal grief not testimony. Kaelor stopped. Evara understood the trap at once. If he touched the pelt, Oren would bury the record inside Kaelor's private loss. If Kaelor remained still, Evara would be forced to carry pain that did not belong to her while the court argued about whether her shoulders had made it unclean. That was Oren's trap. Her suffering kept the record open, but her suffering also gave him a reason to call the record corrupted. The hook tightened. The pelt dragged against her skin. Evara did not scream. She whispered, "Read before he tears it closed." The hide burned cold. The silver-eyed wolf opened its jaws again, and this time every torch in Thornhall guttered blue. The shame pelt had not risen because Evara was chosen. It had opened the hide record of the first wolf forced to wear royal shame, and Kaelor's wounded wolf shadow knew the shape of that pain. But a rite did not rename itself. The shame pelt had named the first pain, but not the hand that renamed it. A renamed wound could become law if enough people laughed at the wrong body. Oren's black hook still held the torn hide near Evara's throat. The curved iron did not pierce her skin, but it did not need to. It pressed close enough that every breath reminded her how easily the court could call restraint mercy. The pelt dragged over her shoulders like a wet winter cloak, heavier now that the hide record had opened. Behind her, the silver-eyed wolf shape loomed from broken fur and moonlit smoke, massive enough to swallow half the dais in shadow. It did not bite Oren. It did not pull Evara away. It did not shield her from the hook. The lost wolf remained what it had become: memory, wearing the outline of a beast waiting for a living body to keep pain from being folded back into silence. And silence was where the Huntmaster office kept its cleanest weapons. Evara's shoulders burned beneath it. Kaelor Draven stood at the edge of the throne platform, one step lower than before, and no farther. His wolf shadow shuddered against the wall behind him, narrow and wounded silver-gold eyes fixed on the hide at Evara's throat. It did not bow. It did not lunge. It only trembled with recognition, as if the pelt had spoken in a language his own beast had been punished for knowing. Oren pulled the hook a fraction higher. The pelt tightened. Evara swallowed against the pressure. "This record is ended," Oren said. "Old shame rites cannot be tried through wolfless shoulders." The court seized the sentence with visible relief. Old rites. Wolfless shoulders. A clean barrier between their laughter and the thing rising behind her. Evara looked at the nobles who had laughed, because a king told them to. Some now stared at the floor. Some watched Oren's hook, as if the hook itself could save them from having heard the record. She forced her voice through the pressure at her throat. "Read who renamed the rite." Oren's eyes cut to her. "Silence. You put the pelt on me. You are not a witness. The pelt says I am." The silver-eyed wolf opened its jaws. Cold wind moved through Thornhall. Not a howl. Not a warning. A breath dragged from somewhere beneath old fur, old hooks, old orders. Then the hide record read. Huntmaster Hook entered. Royal wolf pain sealed. Shame rite rewritten. Lower bodies assigned. The pelt had named the rewriting. It had not yet named what the rite had been feeding. The words formed along the black iron hook itself, silver light crawling over the curve in thin, burning lines. Oren jerked his hand back, but the writing followed the metal as if the hook had always known how to confess without a mouth. Kaelor's face went still. Not because he did not understand. Because he did. "Huntmaster Hook," he said. Oren's jaw tightened. "The Huntmaster's office sanctifies relic handling. Without that office, royal grief would rot into superstition." Royal wolf pain sealed. Kaelor said each word lower than the last. Oren bowed his head, but not his pride. "After the loss of your first wolf bond, the court needed order. Thornhall could not survive every servant, and failed air touching royal mourning as if grief gave them standing." Evara felt the pelt throb against her shoulders. Failed heir. Wolfless woman. Servant. Lower bodies assigned. The phrase dug deeper than the hook. The shame pelt had not been created because wolfless people deserved humiliation. It had been made because royal pain needed somewhere lower to go. And lower in Thornhall always meant someone who could be laughed at without consequence. Kaelor looked at Evara then. Guilt moved across his face, but guilt did not loosen the hide. It did not remove Oren's hook. It did not erase the laughter he had commanded. "If her shoulders are the only contact," Kaelor said, voice rough, "then my silence is still using her." His sentence did not lift the pelt. It only made the use impossible to call mercy. Evara met his eyes. Yes. The word was small. It reached him anyway. Oren stepped between them. "Majesty, if the pelt is removed by proper office, the servant will be spared further damage. That is mercy." "No," Evara said. The hook pressed again. She flinched but did not lower her head. "That is closing the record before it names you." Her breath shook. "Then stop making my body hold what your court renamed." The words cost her more than courage. They cost her the small safety of being pitied. Kaelor's hand closed around the hilt at his side. For one dangerous moment, Evara thought he would cut the hook away by force. Oren wanted that. She saw it in the slight lift of his chin. If Kaelor tore the pelt from her shoulders, the court would remember violence instead of record. If the king touched the hide, Oren would call it royal grief overtaking judgment. If Evara collapsed, the nobles would call the reading unstable. The trap tightened around all three of them. Kaelor released the hilt. "Do not touch the pelt," he ordered. Oren smiled faintly. Then it remains on her. Kaelor's eyes darkened. Evara understood the shape of his rage because she had already been carrying its cause. The pelt shifted again. The silver-eyed wolf bent lower, its great head beside hers, not comforting, not loyal, only near enough that its memory could pass through her shoulders. The hook began to glow. A new image opened in the air, a chamber below the Huntmaster Hall's stone walls lined with old pelts. A younger Kaelor stood in blood-dark armor, silent and white with grief. Beside him lay a massive wolf pelt, silver-eyed even in death. Oren's predecessor lowered a black hook into the hide while court elders watched. The image flickered. The first hook entered the royal pelt. The wolf's pain was sealed. Then, the record shifted. The same pelt was placed years later over the shoulders of a trembling lower servant while the court laughed. Then a failed heir. Then a wolfless girl. Then Evara. The silver words burned brighter. The shame pelt had not begun as punishment for the wolfless. A huntmaster's hook had rewritten royal wolf pain into a shame rite, then taught Thornhall to place that pain on lower shoulders whenever the court needed laughter to hide a wound. But hidden wounds did not stay hidden for free. The shame pelt had shown who renamed the rite, but not what the rite had been feeding. Evara still stood beneath it. The hide pressed into her shoulders until her bones felt carved by its weight. Oren's black hook remained near her throat, close enough that each breath passed under iron before reaching her lungs. The silver-eyed wolf shape loomed behind her from fur and moonlit smoke, but it did not tear the hook away. It did not carry her from the dais. It did not look at her like a savior. It only held the hide record open. That was all. And all was enough to hurt. Around the hall, the court had grown quieter than fear. Nobles who had laughed minutes before now watched the pelt as though laughter itself might be called back to the witness stand. A few looked toward the doors. No one moved. Shame was easier to enjoy when it pointed downward. Once it began to climb back up the walls, even wolves remembered caution. Oren lifted his chin. This reading has crossed into royal grief relapse. The phrase came smooth and prepared. Kaelor's eyes narrowed. Oren turned toward the court, the hook still angled at Evara's throat. The pelt has touched His Majesty's old mourning. It is not testimony. It is a grief echo distorted by wolfless contact. Evara's shoulders burned. Right feeding cannot be judged through a wolfless contact, Oren said. A body without wolf breath cannot measure what a royal pelt consumes. Evara looked at the hook, then at the court, then at Kaelor. He says I cannot measure it, she said. But you keep making me carry it. The silver-eyed wolf behind her lowered its massive head until its breath passed over her hair like winter smoke. Still not protection. Still not devotion. Only memory leaning close enough to use the living shoulders Oren had chosen. Evara swallowed against the iron. Read what the laughter feeds. Oren jerked the hook upward. Silence her. The guards moved one step. Kaelor's voice struck the hall before they reached her. No one touches her. The order stopped them, but it did not free her. The pelt stayed heavy. The hook stayed near. The record stayed open through her pain. The dead fur trembled. Then the laughter returned. Not from the court's mouths. From the pelt. 1,000 thin echoes rose inside the hall. Noble laughter, servant. Sobs swallowed under command. Failed heirs standing stiff beneath torn hide. Wolfless girls taught to bow under dead fur warriors chuckling because the king once ordered it, and no one wanted to be the first silent wolf. The sound crawled beneath Evara's skin. The hide record read. Court laughter entered. Royal wolf pain drained. Huntmaster authority sustained. King Wolf Shadow muted. The words formed in silver light around the hook, then spread across the black banners behind Kaelor's throne. His wolf shadow convulsed. Not rising. Not healed. Muted pain. Answering its own name. Kaelor turned slowly toward the shadow on the wall. For years the court had called it disciplined. Royal. Controlled. Now it shivered like a beast with a muzzle no one could see. Dacian would have raged. Another king might have broken the dais. Kaelor did neither. He stood very still, and that restraint made the hall colder. If my wolf's pain has fed your office, he said then, my throne has worn cruelty as discipline. Oren's face hardened. The Huntmaster office preserved order after royal loss. You fed from it. We contained it. You placed it on lower bodies and commanded the court to laugh. Oren's eyes flashed. The court laughed because shame teaches rank. Evara felt the pelt tighten at that word. Rank. Another clean name for bodies arranged by who could suffer publicly without consequence. She forced herself to speak before Kaelor's anger became the only sound in the room. Then stop asking my shoulders to prove it for you. The words cost her balance. Her knees bent not from surrender but from the pelt dragging another layer of memory through her bones. The silver-eyed wolf shape flickered behind her. For one breath its massive outline blurred, and beneath it Evara saw not a whole beast but strips of hide, stitched pain, hooks, hands, laughter, and the shadow of a royal wolf forced smaller every time the court fed the rite. Kaelor took one step toward the dais. Oren smiled. Evara saw the trap before the king did. If Kaelor rushed forward, Oren would say royal grief had seized the proceeding. If he touched the pelt, the reading would become private mourning. If he cut the hook, Oren would claim the king destroyed evidence to protect a wolfless servant. Do not, Evara said. Kaelor stopped. His jaw clenched as if the restraint cut him. Oren lifted the hook again. See how she directs the king. Wolfless contamination has entered royal judgment. Evara laughed once. It hurt. No, she said. Your right needs me afraid. That is why you hate hearing me think. The pelt answered with a low pulse of blue-white light. A new image opened above the shame dais. The Huntmaster Hall black hooks hanging in a row, each one faintly glowing with echoes of laughter. Beneath them, old ledgers lay open. Not names, not crimes. Counts. How many laughed. How long the pelt was worn. How deeply the king's wolf shadow quieted afterward. The court finally understood that the shame pelt was not only a punishment. It was an engine. Oren struck the hook into the air, trying to tear the image down. Royal grief relapse. Nothing more. But the pelt burned brighter on Evara's shoulders. The shame pelt had not merely hidden Kaelor's first wolf pain. Every court laugh had fed the Huntmaster's authority, keeping the king's wolf shadow muted, while lower bodies carried the wound in public. The ledgers above the shame dais began counting again. Not in ink. In laughter. Silver marks crawled across the ghostly pages suspended in the air, each stroke forming from an old sound the court had once pretended was harmless. Short laughs. Hidden laughs. Nervous laughs. Cruel laughs. Ordered by fathers, elders, commanders, kings. Every one of them slid into the Huntmaster hooks and burned there like oil feeding a shrine. Evara felt each mark settle through the pelt on her shoulders. The hide grew heavier. Her knees trembled. The silver-eyed wolf shape behind her remained huge and silent. Its head lowered beside hers, but still it did not save her. It did not carry the weight for her. It only made the weight visible, which was not the same as mercy. Oren Vaus saw the court watching the ledgers and moved quickly. This proves nothing except accumulated shame-right memory. Every ancient office holds echoes. Echoes do not count, Evara said. Her voice was rough now. The hook near her throat had not cut her, but the pressure had made speaking painful. Oren had learned exactly how close to harm he could stand while still calling himself disciplined. Kaelor's eyes stayed on the ledgers. Why would the Huntmaster office record laughter? Oren's answer came too smoothly. For ritual compliance. No, Evara whispered. For feeding. A ripple passed through the nobles. That word frightened them more than cruelty. Cruelty could be defended as rank. Feeding sounded like hunger. Oren turned sharply toward her. A wolfless servant does not interpret royal rite. Then stop using my shoulders as the page. The silver-eyed wolf opened its jaws. This time the hall heard something. Not a howl. A breath scraped through old fur, broken and low, like a beast trying to speak from under a sealed door. The pelt read again. First laughter entered. Huntmaster seal strengthened. King wolf shadow lessened. Lost wolf name withheld. Kaelor moved as if struck. The banners behind him shifted. His wolf shadow, already narrow and wounded, pressed its head against the wall. Its mouth opened without sound. Lost wolf name withheld. Evara looked at Kaelor. She saw the shape of that line enter him deeper than guilt. This was not only about what his court had done to servants after the rite was rewritten. It was about the first wound they had buried before they taught the kingdom to laugh at everyone lower. Oren raised his hook. Close the ledgers. No one moved. For the first time, his command did not land cleanly. Oren noticed. His face hardened. Then the court will demonstrate lawful correction, he said. Evara's stomach went cold. Kaelor turned. Oren. The huntmaster lifted his hook high, and his voice rang through Thornhall. By old rite, laugh at the wolfless bearer. The court froze. No one wanted to laugh now. But old law had hooks in obedience, too. A thin sound came from one balcony, then another. A noblewoman's breathy laugh, a young lord's brittle chuckle. Someone near the back gave a short, frightened sound and covered his mouth too late. The pelt drank it. Evara nearly collapsed. Pain drove down through her shoulders as if the hide had grown roots into bone. The silver-eyed wolf shape flared brighter, not stronger, not kinder, only more burdened with memory. The ghostly ledgers sharpened. The huntmaster hooks glowed like black stars. Kaelor's wolf shadow shrank against the wall. Not much. Enough. Kaelor saw it happen. So did the court. The laughter died. Evara dragged in a breath through her teeth. That is what it feeds. Oren lowered the hook slowly. The rite responds to compliance. That is not feeding. That is order. Kaelor's voice was almost quiet. You ordered them to laugh, and my wolf shadow weakened. The shadow reacts to grief. No, Evara said. It reacts to theft. The word cut the hall open. Oren stepped close enough that the hook touched the edge of the pelt at her collarbone. Careful, girl. Evara looked at him, shaking under the weight. You still think fear will make me smaller than the record. His eyes darkened. Kaelor took one step toward the dais and stopped before the trap could close. He understood now. If he touched her, Oren would call it royal grief. If he pulled the pelt away, the ledgers would shut. If he ordered every noble punished, the court would make the story about rebellion instead of right. So he did something harder. He looked at the nobles. Every person who laughed by command will remain silent until the pelt finishes reading. Oren smiled coldly. Silence can also be commanded, Majesty. Kaelor's jaw tightened. Evara closed her eyes for one breath. Then she opened them and spoke before his command became another hook. No. Let them choose silence. The court stared at her. She stood beneath their shame, their laughter, their old obedience, and asked for the one thing Thornhall had never required from anyone above her. Choice. One by one, the nobles lowered their eyes. No laughter came. The ledgers flickered. The hooks dimmed. Kaelor's wolf shadow lifted its head by a single inch. Evara felt the pelt loosen. Not enough to fall. Not enough to free her. Enough to read one more hidden line. The silver-eyed wolf turned its head toward the wall behind Kaelor. Its mouth opened, and the sound that came out was not a howl this time. It was a name. The pelt had not yet shown the false execution order. It had only released the name the Huntmaster office had withheld from the king's wounded shadow. Varrock. The name hit Kaelor like a blade drawn from his own ribs. For a moment, no one in Thornhall moved. The ledgers above the shame dais flickered. The black hooks hanging in the vision dimmed to dull iron. Even Oren Voust's hand tightened around his ceremonial hook, as if the metal had suddenly grown too hot to hold. Evara stood beneath the pelt with her shoulders burning. The silver-eyed wolf behind her had not come alive. It had spoken a name. That was worse. A living beast could be called danger. A name could not be killed so easily once the court had heard it. Kaelor's lips parted, but no command came out. His wolf shadow on the wall behind him stretched one trembling paw forward, not toward Evara, not toward the pelt, but toward the sound still hanging in the hall. Varrock. The court had been trained not to say that name. Evara understood it at once. A forbidden name did not vanish because people forgot it. It vanished because every mouth learned the cost of remembering. Oren recovered first. A grief name echo. Kaelor turned his head slowly. Oren bowed with cold precision. Majesty, the pelt has entered the oldest layer of your mourning. This is no longer a shame record. It is royal grief relapse given sound through an unstable bearer. Evara almost laughed, but pain made it smaller than breath. First, it was contamination, she said. Then, surface memory. Then grief relapse. How many names does your office have for truth? Oren's eyes narrowed. Enough to keep wolfless mouths from calling themselves law. The pelt tightened. Evara felt the insult pass through the hide and into something older than her anger. The silver-eyed wolf shape lowered its massive head beside hers. Its breath smelled of snow-dark fur, and old smoke sealed under iron. Not protection. Permission to keep asking. Evara lifted her chin, though the weight nearly bent her neck. Read why the name was withheld. The court shifted uneasily. Oren's hook rose. No. Too quick, Kaelor noticed. Why not? Because royal wolf names belong to burial rites. My wolf's name belonged to me. Oren's mouth hardened. Your Majesty's grief belonged to the throne. The sentence changed the hall. Evara saw it reach Kaelor not as insult, but as explanation. His grief had been treated like crown property. His wolf's silence had been managed. His mourning had been shaped into discipline, and then fed through shame rites, until lower bodies carried the wound publicly, and no one dared look at the king's missing half. Kaelor's voice dropped. Read it. Oren struck the hook against the dais before the pelt could answer. The king cannot command testimony from his own grief. Evara looked at Kaelor. Then stop making him the command. She turned back to the hide, pressing into her shoulders. Read why the name was withheld. The silver-eyed wolf opened its jaws. The hide record answered in strips of pale fur floating through the air. Wolf name spoken. Royal grief sealed. Disobedience buried. Execution order concealed. The last line pulled all warmth from the hall. Execution order concealed. Kaelor went utterly still. His wolf shadow froze with him. Evara did not know what order the record meant, but she felt the pelt's pain shift. Until now it had been humiliation, shame, laughter, the old burden of royal grief forced onto lower shoulders. This was different, sharper. Not only pain endured, but a choice punished. Oren lifted his hook again. Concealed execution orders are war matters. They cannot be tried through a shame relic. Evara stared at him. You knew that line would come. His face did not move. That was answer enough. Kaelor stepped down one more stair from the throne platform. What execution order? Oren turned to him fully. Majesty, your first wolf bond died during a treason purge after refusing alignment with court command. You were young. The kingdom was unstable. Certain records were sealed to preserve the throne. To preserve the throne, Kaelor repeated. His voice held no heat now. Only winter. Evara felt the pelt shudder over her shoulders. The hide did not loosen. In fact, it grew heavier, as though the next memory did not want to pass through her body but had no other way to reach the room. She could barely keep standing. Kaelor saw it. So did Oren. Oren's eyes sharpened with opportunity. The bearer is failing. Remove the pelt. No, Evara whispered. Kaelor's gaze cut to her. She looked back at him, through the cold smoke. If it comes off now, they keep the order. Oren smiled faintly. See? She admits the record depends on her instability. No, Kaelor said. It depends on the contact you created. His hand moved toward his sword, then stopped. He learned the trap faster this time. Force would close the record. Touch would make it grief. Rescue would become erasure if done before the order was read. Evra's knees shook. Ask it, she said. Kaelor's jaw tightened. What did Varrock refuse? The pelt answered before Oren could strike the hook down. False order entered. Royal voice imitated. Lower prisoner marked. Varrock refused execution. A sound broke from Kaelor's wolf shadow. Not a howl. Something wounded, and almost human. The silver-eyed wolf behind Evara lifted its head, and for the first time the court saw its massive throat marked by a black hook-shaped scar. Oren shouted, "Close the record!" The pelt burned white across Evara's shoulders. The shame dais vanished into smoke, replaced by a night-black execution yard. A kneeling prisoner bound before the court guard. A young Kaelor absent from the scene, and a huntmaster seal glowing over an order written in the king's prisoner. Nam. The pelt had not been made from a wolf that died in royal mourning. It had been made from Varrock after he refused a false execution order, carrying Kaelor's stolen voice. The execution yard opened inside Thornhall like a wound the court had built a roof over. Moon smoke swallowed the shame dais. The black floor beneath Evara's bare feet became frozen mud in the vision, slick with old rain and trampled by armored boots. Torches burned blue along the edges. A lower prisoner knelt in the center with his hands bound behind him, head bowed, face hidden beneath tangled hair. Above him hung an execution order sealed in the Alpha King's name. But Kaelor had not been there. The younger king stood nowhere in the memory. Only his voice had. Evara felt the pelt shudder against her shoulders. The silver-eyed wolf behind her stretched higher, and the black hook-shaped scar around its throat burned bright enough that several nobles looked away. Still it did not protect her. Still it did not attack. It only held the old yard open through her body while the court tried not to breathe. Kaelor stared at the false order, his face hollowed by recognition he had never been allowed to reach. My voice was used. Orenvau stepped forward with the black hook tight in his fist. Royal command may be carried by Huntmaster Seal in times of unrest. My voice was imitated. The seal represented the throne. The throne is not my throat. The words cut through the hall. Evara's knees weakened under the pelt, but she forced herself upright. If she fell now, Oren would call the vision unstable. If she screamed, he would call her corrupted. If she endured too quietly, the court would forget she was still the one carrying the weight. She looked into the execution yard. The kneeling prisoner lifted his head. Not enough to show his face. Enough to show a servant collar. A lower body. Assigned again. Evra's mouth went dry. Read who gave the false voice. Oren's hook snapped toward her. The dead cannot be tried through a wolfless bearer. The dead are not the ones afraid. His eyes sharpened. Careful. Evara looked at the hook near her throat. You keep saying that as if care ever saved anyone below you. The pelt pulsed cold. The hide record answered. Royal voice copied. Huntmaster Seal carried. Execution witness removed. Wolf bond ordered to obey. Kaelor's wolf shadow twisted against the wall behind him, muzzle opening in silent pain. Wolf bond ordered to obey. The silver-eyed wolf behind Evara turned toward Kaelor, not forgiving, not pleading, only showing him the shape of the command that had been buried under years of discipline. Oren's voice hardened. A wolf bond must obey lawful execution. Kaelor did not look at him. Varrock refused. Then the beast broke rank. No, Evara said. Every eye turned to her. She did not know why she knew it, until the pelt pressed memory through her shoulders like cold fire. Not speech. Not power. A feeling of a wolf standing before a kneeling body, and knowing the voice above him wore his king's sound but not his king's will. Varrock knew the voice was wrong, she said. The execution yard sharpened. In the vision, the massive, silver-eyed wolf stood between the kneeling prisoner and the Huntmaster guard. His body was whole then, living immense fur, silver dark beneath rain eyes, burning with the same light that now rose from the pelt. The false order rang again, carrying Kaelor's stolen voice. Execute. Varrock did not move. The word came again. Execute. The wolf lowered his head not to submit, but to place his body before the prisoner. A shudder passed through Thornhall. Kaelor gripped the stair rail so hard stone cracked beneath his hand. Oren struck the hook against the dais. Close the yard. The vision flickered, but Evara stepped forward under the pelt's weight. Read why the prisoner was marked. Oren's face changed. Only for a breath. That was enough, the hide record read. Lower witness held. Council theft seen. Huntmaster crime exposed. False execution required. The prisoner in the vision lifted his face. He was not a rebel, not a murderer, not a traitor. He was a lower records keeper, young and thin, with ink stains still dark on his fingers. He had seen something the Huntmaster office needed buried. Evara swallowed against sudden nausea. How many shame rites began with a witness no one let speak? Oren's answer was ice. Enough. The word slipped out before he could dress it as doctrine. The court heard it. Kaelor heard it. Evara heard the pelt hear it. The silver-eyed wolf roared without sound, and every black hook in the ghostly Huntmaster hall blazed white. Kaelor stepped down from the throne platform fully now, but stopped before the dais. Not because he feared Oren. Because Evara had taught him what force could ruin. His voice was low. Name the one who carried the false order. Oren lifted his chin. Majesty, if you force this reading, you condemn an office that preserved your reign. Kaelor's eyes went dark. If my reign was preserved by my stolen voice and my wolf's skin, then it has been sitting on a grave. The pelt answered before Oren could speak. False order carried by Huntmaster line. Sealbearer Oren Voust. Thornhall went silent. Oren did not confess. He did not collapse. He smiled. Then let the court decide whether one wolfless woman's shoulders outweigh the throne's survival. The black hook flashed. He drove it into the edge of the pelt and twisted. Evara cried out at last. The vision shattered into silver fur and blue flame, but not before one final line burned across the air. Varrock was not executed for disobedience. He was skinned because he recognized the king's voice had been stolen. Evara's cry finally gave the court what it had been waiting for. Weakness. Oren twisted the black hook deeper into the edge of the Shame Pelt, and the silver-eyed wolf shape behind her fractured along one shoulder, strips of moonlit smoke tearing like old cloth. The vision of the execution yard broke apart. Frozen mud became black marble again. The kneeling records keeper vanished. The false order burned down to sparks. Evara staggered, but the pelt did not fall. It clung harder, not to save her, to keep the wound open. The torn hide dragged against her throat where Oren's hook held it. Pain ran from her collarbone into her spine, cold and sharp as if the record itself had teeth, and they were closing around the body, forced to carry it. Kaelor moved, then stopped himself so violently that his armor scraped against the stair rail. His wolf shadow pressed forward on the wall, wide-eyed and shaking, but it did not leap. It did not bow. It did not claim Evara. It stared at the hook buried in the pelt as if recognizing the old instrument that had taught it silence. Oren turned to the court. You see, the bearer breaks when the record is challenged. This is not testimony. This is pelt madness. Evara breathed through her teeth. Pelt madness, she whispered. Another name. Oren leaned close enough that only the front of the hall could hear him. Names keep people alive when truth would ruin kingdoms. Evara looked at him. There it was. Not confession. Doctrine stripped of its ceremonial fur. She lifted one trembling hand to the pelt near the hook. Her fingers did not touch the iron. She knew better. If she grabbed it, Oren would call her interference. If Kaelor tore it away, Oren would call it royal grief. If the pelt closed now, Varrock would become tragedy instead of evidence. Read where the stolen voice was kept, she said. Oren's expression hardened. A wolfless bearer cannot try royal command. Kaelor's voice cut through the hall. She is not trying my command. She is reading who stole it. Oren looked at him. Majesty, if you permit this, every order carried under Huntmaster seal can be questioned. Good. The word was quiet. The court heard it anyway. The pelt pulsed. The broken wolf shape behind Evara lowered its massive head, silver eyes burning through the torn smoke. It did not look grateful. It did not forgive. It simply opened its jaws as the hide record dragged another layer into the air. Royal voice copied. Huntmaster hook stored. False command carried. Wolf bond punished. The words formed around Oren's black hook. Not on the wall. Not in smoke. On the metal itself. Oren tried to pull the hook free. It would not move. For the first time, the instrument held him. A tremor moved through Thornhall. Kaelor stepped down another stair but kept his hands open at his sides. The stolen voice was stored in the hook. Oren's jaw tightened. The hook carries lawful command. It carried my voice without me. It carried the throne. The throne is not a mouth for your office. Evara nearly dropped to one knee, but she locked her legs beneath the pelt. The hide was heavier now, not because it loved pain, but because the court had spent years feeding it weight. Every old laugh, every sealed order, every lower body assigned to royal shame dragged through her shoulders. Kaelor saw her sway. His face changed. Not with possession. With restraint so painful it looked like damage. He understood now that wanting to remove the burden did not make him innocent if removal closed the proof. Wanting to touch the wound did not heal the person forced to hold it. Evara forced the next words out before he could make her endurance another royal choice. Read who benefited from the stolen voice. Oren's hook flared black. No, he said. The pelt answered. Huntmaster authority rose. Royal doubt contained. Council executions preserved. King Wolf Shadow obedience enforced. Kaelor's wolf shadow gave a soundless convulsion against the wall. Its body stretched wider for one breath, then pulled tight again as if unseen chains ran through its ribs. Obedience enforced. Evara understood then. Varrock had not only been punished for refusing the false order. His skin, his pain, his name, and Kaelor's stolen voice had become a mechanism. Every shame rite after that had done two things at once. It humiliated lower bodies, and it taught Kaelor's damaged wolf shadow to remain small whenever the Huntmaster Hook spoke. Orin had not preserved order. He had trained the king's wolf to obey theft. Kaelor's voice turned cold enough to silence the braziers. My wolf was never disciplined. Orin said nothing. Evara finished it for him. It was conditioned. The words struck like a thrown blade. Orin ripped at the hook again. This time it came loose from the pelt, with a tearing sound that made Evara's knees buckle. The wolf shape behind her split wider along the shoulder and the hide record flickered dangerously. Kaelor took one step forward. Evara caught herself on the edge of the dais. Do not make the last thing it reads your rescue. He stopped. The pelt shuddered over her shoulders. The silver-eyed wolf lifted its head toward the black hook in Orin's hand, and one final line burned across the torn hide before the record dimmed. The false execution order had not stolen only Kaelor's voice. It had stored royal command inside the Huntmaster Hook, then taught Thornhall to obey Orin whenever cruelty sounded like the king. Orin's hook held Kaelor's stolen command like a throat that had learned to speak without a body. The black iron smoked in his hand, its curve burning with silver lines from the hide record. Evara stood bent beneath the shame pelt, one hand braced against the edge of the dais, her shoulders shaking under the torn fur. Behind her, the silver-eyed wolf shape had split at one shoulder, its body flickering between beast and relic, between memory and hide. It did not heal itself. It did not heal her. It waited for the record to finish bleeding into the room. Orin lifted the hook. When he spoke, the sound was not only his. Seize the bearer. The first word came in Orin's voice. The second carried Kaelor's. The court froze. So did the guards. Kaelor's face drained of warmth. His wolf shadow slammed both paws against the wall mouth, opening in a silent snarl as the stolen tone echoed through Thornhall. Evara felt the pelt shudder at her shoulders. The hook had not only stored an old command, it could still borrow the shape of the king's authority. It could still make cruelty sound lawful. Two guards took one step toward her before they realized they had obeyed. Kaelor's voice cracked across the hall. Stop. They stopped at once, horrified. Orin smiled without joy. You see, Majesty, the realm obeys what carries royal sound. That is how order survives. No, Evara said, forcing herself upright. That is how theft survives. The hook turned toward her. Orin's eyes hardened. A wolfless bearer does not judge royal command. I am not judging it. Her breath dragged through pain. I am hearing the part you stole. The silver-eyed wolf behind her lowered its broken shoulder, its silver gaze fixed on the hook. Evara understood the next question before she formed it. The pelt had shown what the hook stored. It had not shown what could make stolen command stop sounding royal. She pressed one trembling hand to the torn hide at her collarbone. Read what makes a command false. Orin struck the hook against the floor. No. The word carried only his voice now. Fear had stripped the king from it. The pelt answered. King absent. Voice copied. Witness silenced. Wolfbond refused. The words formed between Orin and Kaelor like four blades hung in air. Kaelor stared at the first line. King absent. He had spent years believing grief had taken Varrock from him in a lawful purge, that his wolf bond had broken rank, that the kingdom survived because someone else had made the hard decisions while he mourned. But the record did not show hard decisions. It showed absence used as a weapon. Evara's knees shook. The pelt dragged deeper into her shoulders, as if the hide had grown roots around her bones. She could feel old laughter under it. Old hooks, old orders, every lower body forced to carry the shape of royal shame. Kaelor took one careful step closer. Orin lifted the hook again. Touch the pelt and this becomes royal grief again. Kaelor stopped. The restraint cost him. Evara saw it in the rigid line of his jaw, in the tremor of his open hands. He looked at her instead of the pelt. What does it need? The question moved through the court like a thing no king had ever asked a wolfless woman on a shame dais. Evara's throat tightened. Not from tenderness, from exhaustion. It needs the stolen voice named false, she said. Not by your blade, by your mouth. Oren laughed once. If the king names old huntmaster command false, every purge carried under this office can be reopened. Kaelor looked at him. Good. Oren's face went still. The court shifted not in shock this time, but calculation. Old purges meant old inheritances, old executions, old lands taken from lower houses, and failed heirs. Thornhall's shame rites were not decoration. They had been paperwork with laughter for ink. The pelt pulsed again. Another line burned down its torn spine. False command remains until royal voice rejects borrowed authority. Kaelor read it aloud. Then he looked at the hook in Oren's hand. My voice in that order was false. The hall seemed to lose air. Oren's grip tightened. Kaelor continued, each word controlled enough to hurt. Any command carried by that hook in my name without my living will is false. The hook screamed. Not with sound. With pressure. The torches guttered blue again. The silver-eyed wolf behind Evara convulsed, and Evara nearly fell as the pelt dragged the rejection through her shoulders. The record did not spare her because the king spoke truth. It used the contact it had. Kaelor stepped forward on instinct. Evara lifted one hand. No. He stopped. Her voice broke. Do not make it stop before it reads what your rejection releases. Oren raised the hook with both hands. Then let the court see what his mercy costs. The hook flared black. All around Thornhall, ghostly shapes appeared beneath the banners, veiled heirs in torn fur. Lower servants bent under laughter, wolfless girls, standing alone on the shame dais. Mouths, tight eyes dry because crying made the court laugh. Harder. Each one carried a faint silver thread leading back to the huntmaster hook. The pelt read, Lower shame records bound. Court laughter preserved. Royal pain distributed. Varrock loyalty concealed. Kaelor's wolf shadow went utterly still. Varrock loyalty concealed. Evara felt the words like heat beneath ice. The first true wolf bond had not been disobedient. He had been loyal enough to refuse a stolen voice. Loyal enough to stand between false law and a lower witness. Loyal enough to die with his name buried so the Huntmaster office could teach the king's remaining shadow to obey. Oren's voice sharpened. Loyalty to a lower prisoner over royal command is treason. Kaelor answered without looking away from the record. Loyalty to my true will over your stolen voice is not treason. The silver-eyed wolf lifted its head. For the first time, Kaelor's wounded wolf shadow answered with a sound. Low. Broken. Not healed. But no longer silent. The hook cracked once. Oren looked down at it and fear finally reached his face. Evara saw the crack and understood the final lock. The hook could not break while the shame records remained bound to lower bodies. Varrock's name had been returned. Kaelor's stolen voice had been rejected. But every person who had worn the pelt after him still held the old pain in public silence. The pelt wrote one last line across the air. To break the hook, the first shame must be named loyal, and every lower shoulder forced to carry royal pain must be released before the court. The first shame had to be named loyal before the hook could break. No one in Thornhall wanted to be the first voice after that. The ghostly shapes beneath the banners stood in rows of silver smoke. Failed heirs, lower servants, wolfless girls, old men with bent shoulders. Children too young to understand why laughter had followed them home. Every one of them wore the same torn pelt in memory. Everyone held a thin silver thread leading back to Oren Vaust's black hook. Evara stood at the center of those threads with the living shame pelt heavy across her shoulders. Her body shook. Not because she was chosen, because the court had made her contact. Because every old humiliation wanted release through the same shoulders Thornhall had tried to make small. Kaelor looked at the smoking hook in Oren's hand, then at the silver-eyed wolf shape behind Evara. His wolf shadow had made a sound only once, and now it trembled on the wall like a beast afraid to trust its own throat. Oren lifted the cracked hook. Majesty, if you name Varrock loyal, you accuse every huntmaster judgment after him. Kaelor's eyes did not leave the pelt. Then every judgment after him may answer. Orin's mouth tightened. You will unmake your court for a wolfless bearer. No, Evara said before Kaelor could answer. Her voice scraped thin but clear. She looked at Orin. For everybody you made wear what did not belong to them. The silver threads brightened. Orin raised the hook higher. Seize her. This time no one moved. The guards stood still. The nobles stood still. Even those who had laughed by old command kept their mouths closed. Choice entered the hall like winter air through an open gate. Kaelor stepped down to the lowest stair before the dais. He did not touch the pelt. He did not reach for Evara. He stood close enough for everyone to see that restraint was not absence. Then he faced the court. Varuk was loyal. The silver-eyed wolf behind Evara lifted its head. Kaelor continued, his voice deeper, breaking only where grief made truth sharper. He did not betray me. He refused a stolen command. He stood between false law and a lower witness when my own voice had been taken from me. The hook cracked again. Orin's hand shook. Kaelor turned toward the ghostly rows beneath the banners. Every lower shoulder forced to carry royal pain under the shame pelt is released from the rite. The silver threads snapped one by one. No scream followed. No explosion. Only the soft, devastating sound of old burdens falling where they should have fallen years ago. Evara gasped as the weight on her shoulders lessened. Not vanished. Not yet. The pelt still clung to her because she was the open witness, but the hundreds of old threads no longer pulled through her spine. The ghostly figures began to fade. One lower servant lifted his head before disappearing. A failed heir dropped the torn pelt from his shoulders. A wolfless girl in the smoke looked toward Evara with dry eyes and vanished without bowing. They did not owe her worship. They owed the court nothing. Orin snarled and drove the cracked hook toward the pelt, desperate to close what remained. Kaelor moved, then stopped. Evara saw the restraint tear through him. She saw the old king in him, the wounded boy, the alpha, who wanted to break iron with his hands and call it justice. Ask, she whispered. His gaze found hers. May I stop the hook? Yes. Only then did Kaelor strike. Not the pelt. Not her. His blade met the black iron hook before it touched her shoulder. The cracked metal shattered in a burst of blue-white flame, and every torch in Thornhall went out. For one heartbeat the hall stood in darkness. Then the Shame Pelt opened its final record. Varuk loyalty restored. Huntmaster authority broken. Borrowed royal command rejected. Shame rite ended. The silver-eyed wolf behind Evara stepped out of the pelt for the first time. Not as a protector. Not as a claimed beast. As a memory freed from the hide that had trapped it. It turned toward Kaelor's wolf shadow on the wall. The two shapes looked at one another across the hall, the lost first bond and the muted shadow that had survived after him. Kaelor's wolf shadow did not bow. It stood taller. Whole, no, but no longer trained into silence. Varrock's freed memory lowered its head once toward the broken hook, then dissolved into silver smoke that rose through the shattered rooflight and vanished into the moon. The pelt slipped from Evara's shoulders. Kaelor caught it before it struck the floor, then stopped and looked at her. Where should it go? Evara stared at the torn hide. Without the wolf memory inside it, the pelt looked smaller. Sadder. Still real. Not the shame room, she said. No. Not the Huntmaster Hall. Never again. She touched the edge of the hide with 2 fingers. It was cold now. Only cloth and fur and history. Put it where the court has to see what laughter fed. Kaelor nodded. Orin Voust tried to step back into shadow. The guards blocked him. Kaelor did not raise his voice. High Huntmaster Orin Voust is stripped of office. Every execution, pelt rite, and lower body shame judgment carried under his hook will be reopened. Orin's face twisted. You will drown Thornhall in old wounds. Evara looked at him. They were already drowning. You only made them quiet. The court heard her. This time no one laughed. Kaelor turned to Evara. His expression held grief, guilt, and something more dangerous because it did not ask to be forgiven quickly. I cannot undo the command I gave. No, she said. I cannot make the pelt never touch you. No. His jaw tightened. Then what can I give? Evara looked at the empty shame. Dais, the broken hook, the silent court. and the first inch of space her shoulders had felt in years. Standing, she said. Not pity, not protection. Standing, Kaelor bowed his head. Not as a wolf to a mate, not as a king choosing a woman before a court, but as a ruler finally admitting where judgment had been stolen from those beneath him. Then, Thornhall will hear you standing. Evara stepped down from the shame dais on her own feet. Her body ached. Her shoulders burned. She was still wolfless. No hidden beast burst from her skin. No crown appeared. No mate bond saved the day. But the court parted for her, not because she had become what they valued, because what they valued had been exposed. Kaelor walked beside her, close enough to face the court, with her far enough not to claim the victory as his own. Behind them, his wolf shadow lifted its head and gave one low sound into the silent hall. Not healed, not whole, but heard. And Evara Brindle, the wolfless girl forced to wear dead shame, left the dais as the first living witness of the hide record Thornhall could no longer bury.